Wel, prynhawn da bawb, croeso I cyfarfod. Welcome to this meeting. My name is Martin Pollard and I'm the Chief Executive of the Learned Society of Wales, and thank you all so much for joining us for this event this afternoon. As I'm sure you're aware, the purpose of the event is to discuss how we can maintain mental health in academia, as we know that this is an area that particularly, I think, since the pandemic has begun, has been quite a challenge for many people, not only in academia, of course, but that's the focus for us today. The Early Career Researchers Network that the Learned Society of Wales established last year is an opportunity for people from across Wales and beyond, and from across all institutions, to come along and make connections with other people, to learn collaboratively about various issues of importance to ECRs. And we hope that as we continue to develop these events over the coming months and years, that you'll find it's a really useful resource, and do hope that if you haven't already, you'll sign up to our mailing list so you can find out more about what we're doing. I'd like to introduce Alex Hurd. She has very kindly agreed to chair this first session for us. And so I'm going to pass over to you now, Alex.
Thank you, Martin. I'm Alex Hurd. I am a PhD candidate between the departments of international politics and psychology at Aberystwyth University. My thesis looks at mental health services, specifically crisis services in Wales. So our first speaker is Dr. Masoumeh Minou. She is a behavioural psychologist and a qualified integrative psychotherapist. She is a part of Swansea University's Health and Wellbeing team, with a focus on staff wellbeing and promoting positive mental health. She believes in prevention rather than treatment and uses a holistic approach to her work.
I believe I have only about 10 minutes to just kind of quickly highlight some signs and syndromes and how imposter syndrome would manifest differently in different people, and then kind of conclude with ways that we can manage this syndrome. So just to give an idea, what are the signs of imposter syndrome? The phenomenon when people feel that they're not worthy of their success and their achievements. It's a persistent belief that they lack skills, they lack the competence that is needed in the area of work or study, or the ability, despite having huge amounts of evidence to the contrary to their belief, but the belief is there. How does it manifest? Imposter syndrome is like a faulty belief. If we're doing something difficult, and this applies to everybody, all human beings, if we're doing something difficult or trying something new, it's very natural to experience some discomfort. It's kind of entering into a new territory when we haven't really got any idea of how things are going to pan out. But it's how we interpret that discomfort that is key. So in reality, there is this feeling of uncertainty. We just don't know how things are going to move forward. Everybody wants to do well at something, whatever it is. It could be a promotion, it could be completing a PhD, a degree, changing your job, it could be anything, but not being quite sure if we can do it, if we can handle it, if we can cope with it. So this is what happens in reality, and it happens for everybody. But If someone feels like an imposter, they would interpret this as not being good enough. I must be a fraud. And thinking that it's just me and everybody else has it together. Everyone knows how to manage things. Everyone knows how to cope with things. But I don't. I'm a fraud. And just not recognizing that all humans are imperfect, and just thinking that it's only me and everybody else is great, composed, got it together. So came across this image, which I think demonstrates really clearly that the imposter would think that what they know is that small blue kind of circle, but what I think others know, what they think others know, is that large circle. Whereas in reality, everyone's the same. We all have some ability, some knowledge, some good skills in one area, and then there are other areas that we need to improve. We need to learn more. We need to gain more competence. But it's the faulty belief that makes the person who feels like an imposter think that they haven't got what it takes, basically. How do we recognize imposter syndrome in ourselves? It's to do with the beliefs, the thinking and feelings. So it's got both aspects of feelings and also thoughts. So do you believe that you don't deserve your success, whatever it might be? Do you believe that other people will find out that you're not as competent or capable as they really think you are? Do you think a lot of your success are down to external factors like luck, like, oh, it was just good timing, or it was the team who made it happen, not me, or my line manager's just been too kind to me? Do you find it hard to take on board your achievements? And do you think others have it way more together than you? They know how to manage the work. They know how to keep the balance between life and work and life. They know how to cope with pressure, but I don't. So it's those kind of, like I said, faulty beliefs. But we all experience imposter syndrome depending on our competence type. And there are 5 types of competence. The first one is the perfectionist. And that's usually, it's a workplace difficulty with the perfectionist, because anything less than perfect would be interpreted as a failure. So everything's got to be perfect. And it makes it really hard when you're working in a team. The second type of competence is the natural genius. So the natural genius, they believe they have competence. The competence is something that they should be inherently good at. There is this demand of it. They should be good at it in terms of their ability, in terms of their intelligence. And if they come up against any difficulties, if they struggle with anything, they would then feel like a failure. And the problem with the natural genius type is that there is usually no room for learning more and for developing further. I'm looking at my notes. These guys who belong to this group are usually very bright, and they find things really easy academically. But like I said, they don't leave much room for learning and developing further. Type 3 is the soloist. Competence only counts if you've done it on your own. That again makes it really problematic if there is a team of people. So they want to prove that the work is just their work as an individual. And if they have to ask for help, they would see that as a failure. Type 4, the expert. They define competence as knowing everything. No room for learning, very rigid mindset. They know it. These guys don't have a flexible kind of growth mindset. Then they usually have several degrees and qualifications, high flyers. But if they come across something that means that they need to learn it, then they find that very difficult. So these are the guys that if they're supposed to be playing tennis, for example, with a friend or with a colleague, they would go and get 10 tennis lessons beforehand, even though they already know how to play tennis, just to make sure that they are absolutely expert in that field. And type 5 are known as superwoman or superman, and they're like the perfectionist on turbocharge. It's about being good and excelling in multiple areas in life. They want to be the best, the most perfect spouse, the most perfect parent, a brilliant volunteer, great cook. And in their line of work, they want to be top. And if they struggle at any of these multiple areas in any aspect, then they would feel like a failure, and not recognizing that actually they're expecting way too much from themselves. And it is kind of humanly impossible to be excellent in everything, in all aspects of life. And again, it's just the imposter cycle as a visual. So there is a project or a piece of work. For a person who feels like an imposter, this would provoke so much anxiety. It would also bring about loss of self-doubt, lack of confidence. Would I be able to do this? Can I handle this? Can I finish this? I haven't got the knowledge. I haven't got the skills. So there is a lot of worry. And because of those feelings, then the behavior that follows from those feelings is that they either over-prepare, which is very tiring, or they procrastinate for as long as possible. When the task is accomplished, when the task is done, there is a feeling of relief, but that's not because they've achieved something. It's just because the task is over. And then they would ignore or push away any positive feedback. They would contribute the success to the efforts of others, or it was just luck, or it was just good timing, or they were working with a great team. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't acknowledge the effort that the rest of the team are making, but it's about how do we feel about our own efforts. And as a result of all these kind of feelings, again, the person would feel like a fake, self-doubt comes back, very intense feelings of anxious thoughts, and unfortunately also depression. So the challenges are that the person who does feel like an imposter always feels that they're a fraud, they're inadequate, and they feel on edge because they don't want people to get close to them. Otherwise, they'll find out that they're not all that. They feel undeserving of positive feedback or reward, or even acknowledging that they've accomplished something. And these would then, the associated feelings from this would be anxiety, like I said, isolation. And as a result of isolation, they could develop different types of phobias. Obsessive compulsive disorder can be caused by imposter syndrome, and also depression. But it's good to kind of like mention what causes imposter syndrome. Personality traits are mainly kind of behind imposter syndrome, and those who do experience it would also struggle with self-efficacy issues, with perfectionism, and also self-esteem issues. So there is the childhood conditioning that can cause that. The messages that we've heard from our parents or from a significant other, you come back with a great grade, but it's not good enough. You could have done better. I want you to do this. I want you to achieve that. So there's always that pressure and kind of wanting you to, it's not enough. What you have is not enough. What you gain is not enough. Go for something more. But also nurture, which happens when perhaps you're not a child anymore, and in a competitive environment like the academia. And can happen both to students and staff. There's intense pressure about KPI for academics, meeting targets, bringing funding in, doing research as well as teaching, and being perfect at everything. And for students as well. And if people are in the field of sport, it's about the performance and how you could maximize performance even more. So yeah, it comes from childhood, but it also comes from the nurturing environment. And just to kind of finish off my section, it is not impossible to completely get rid of imposter syndrome, but I thought the kind of the better term to explain it would be managing it, how best we can manage imposter syndrome. It feels like we don't belong. It feels like, yeah, okay, well, I've got this job and I'm part of this team, but actually deep down, I don't feel like I fit in. And it's because we're not acknowledging our expertise, we're not acknowledging our accomplishment, which is key. And that's why we are there. And other people recognize that in us. Reminding ourselves that we have earned our place in academia, in our professional environment, in whatever it is that we are doing, and paying attention to what comparison model are we using to measure our accomplishments. Are we comparing ourselves and our achievements with others? Or are we comparing ourselves with ourselves, but an older version? So am I a better person than I was a year ago or 5 years ago? Or am I comparing myself to someone who has a totally different lifestyle, life journey, life story, and also genetic makeup to me? So is that comparison fair? Is that comparison realistic? And people with imposter syndrome often put a lot of pressure on themselves to complete every task flawlessly and perfectly. So they fear that any mistake will reveal to others that they're not good enough and they're a fraud. So it's about working on being okay with things not being perfect. Also, it puts a lot of pressure on people around the person with the imposter syndrome, that could be family members and that could be colleagues. Sometimes the pressure is quite subtle and it's at a low level. So people don't realize it, don't recognize it, but it accumulates and it gets to a point that it just becomes unmanageable. And it's about cultivating a mindset of recognizing our strengths and weaknesses and accepting our limitations. And yes, things are tough and things are difficult, but we are here, wherever you are at, whatever stage you are at, you are here for a reason. So and reflecting on what we've achieved, how far we have come so far, really does help. Celebrating our achievements and success. And I think this is something that, especially from a behavioral psychology aspect, is missing from our behaviors. Yes, we are so good at making a list of things to do, and we might check them. Do we? Not all the time, but okay, it's not just about checking that, okay, we've done task 1 to task 10. It's also just celebrating the fact that, yes, we have achieved all this. It doesn't matter how big or small. It's about the fact that something was supposed to be done and it's now done, and that's it. So celebrate it. And you can have different ways of celebrating. You could just pat yourself on the shoulder and say, well done, Maz, I do that. And if it's something to do with kind of like activities and that, maybe it's, I was able to run faster or go further in my run, then it's like I go like that, you know, like do more Farah or do what's his name, Usain Bolt version, whatever that is good for you. A thumbs up to yourself, a smile, just something that you say to yourself internally, like well done, or oh, it feels great. So that celebration just reinforces that recognition in our brain, that yes, we have done this, we have achieved this, and it's ours, so we own it.
Next up, we have Dr. Sarah Ward Clavier. Sarah is a senior lecturer in early modern history at the University of the West of England. She completed her doctorate in 2017 at the University of Oxford and has published on royalist ballads, Welsh royalism, 17th century autobiography, biographical and biographical writing. Her monograph, Royalism, Religion and Revolution, Wales 1640 to 88, will be published in November by Boydell and Brewer.
Funnily, when I was considering what I would say as part of this panel, I initially thought, well, I'm not really the right person to talk about imposter syndrome. Or maybe that's just imposter syndrome in action once again. After all, symptoms of self-doubt about one's suitability for job roles, about achievements or accomplishments, feelings of inadequacy are things that I've always suffered from significantly more in my personal rather than my work life. This is perhaps surprising. I went from being a North Welsh state school student at Durham at a time when that was not a usual thing, to returning to complete my doctorate at Oxford after teaching in further education. I was unsuccessful in applying for funding, so chose a part-time route, working a huge variety of freelance, part-time or contract jobs, from scaring birds off a tip, working on a cruise ship, doing financial PR, to complete my doctorate. And this would seem like a recipe for imposter syndrome. But perhaps to the credit of my institution, my peers, I never actually felt like I didn't belong. Indeed, I felt like I'd earned my place at the academic table, and I was quite proud to be there. But reflecting on this further, even more since listening to Mas talk just then, this isn't actually entirely accurate. I've been successful in applying for fellowships, funding and jobs, but you were absolutely right, Mas, that my success often seemed like luck or circumstance. And I find it really difficult to ascribe it to my own initiative without seeming boastful or arrogant. I often worry after presenting papers, lectures, or discussing my research with others, and get anxious when things don't seem to be coming together. So the kind of postlude after this session will be loads of fun for my brain, by the way. This can be exhausting, and self-criticality can lead to hours of worry, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. What did I say wrong? What did I say right? Did this make any sense? Am I just talking about myself? Oh my Lord, it's awful. And so this led me to kind of reassess the typicality of my experience and feelings, and maybe think, well, maybe imposter syndrome, or at least the self-doubt at the root of it, was something that I should consider after all. And when preparing for the session again, I asked a wide cross-section of my friends and acquaintances about their experiences. So their experiences of imposter syndrome, of work stress, of mental health in their academic and non-academic jobs. And I was really surprised by the answers, although again, perhaps I shouldn't have been. From railway signalmen to clergy, senior staff to trainees, all of them had felt some degree of worry that they were the right person for their job and that they were doing it to the best of their ability. So I guess the first point that I'd like to make here is that academia isn't unique, far from it. Professionals across sectors experience the feelings of intense self-doubt that also plague us within HE. This may well not make mental health struggles in academia feel any better, but it might potentially point to solutions, sources of advice, or other ways of thinking. Another common point was that a little bit of self-doubt might well be a good thing, rather than something to be afraid of. It spurs us on to success, can make us work harder. And strangely, this was in the words of one of my first ever students when I started teaching an FE at 23, and this lad was only a couple of years younger than me, teaching an FE. Obviously you get students of all ages, and we've stayed in touch, and he said, well, you know, if we're all bossing it like Alan Sugar, then it'd be unbearable. So maybe it's good that we have a little bit of that positive moral virtue of humility, although obviously that's something to distinguish from a kind of more serious and limiting condition. Another friend made for me what's a really key point, which is that imposter syndrome as a label can be seen as problematic because it masks, or can mask, sector-wide or institutional issues, placing the responsibility for mental health on the individual, and helping to avoid looking deeper at other causes, other ways of support, maybe. During a roughly 18-year-old career, that's really scary, across educational sectors, I've seen many trends where institutions individualise problems that result from sector-wide difficulties. So courses on being more resilient, for example, when your sense of overwhelm results from an unmanageably heavy workload and a lack of acknowledgement of your various responsibilities and roles. Or perhaps mindfulness classes as a solution to exhaustion and depression resulting from workplace stress. Precarity, whether as a result of being an associate lecturer, an hourly paid lecturer, a research associate, or being an international colleague, perhaps grappling with the immigration system here, places a significant burden of stress on academics and their families, with many seeking other career paths as a result. And now this isn't to say that either resilience or mindfulness training are without value, far from it, but that the wider problems are what places the heaviest burden on individual staff and their teams. And so institutions, unions and individuals need to be able to have honest conversations, in my opinion, about workplace cultures and expectations, as well as their potentially corrosive impact on people's health and happiness. When myself suffering from burnout aged 25 as a teacher working for over 80 hours a week, I required support, understanding and a plan for recovery, not advice at that point about going for a walk or listening to a podcast, much as those things may be lovely when in normal circumstances. One of the other reasons that self-confidence can be such an issue in academia is that so much of our academic life is about being critical and exercising judgment. It's like our superpower, right? We're rightly critical of our own work in draft, of others in review and writing. And certainly as a historian, I'm constantly exercising judgment in terms of my evidence and the conclusions that I'm drawing from it. It's then easy, though, to turn that superpower, that criticality inwards. And it's much more difficult to turn the critical voice off. So again, in my experience, what can be very helpful professionally in improving my academic work, in seeking more robust evidence, hunting down historical sources in the archives and the National Library, can be my worst enemy when tired and wanting rest. So turning off the kind of monkey brain, the thing that just keeps drumming, is one of the hardest things to do. And when accompanied by overwork, it can become a bigger problem again and requires significantly more support to recover from. Now to finish, this is all very negative, and given that the session was entitled, more optimistically, maintaining mental health in academia, I feel like I should also propose some thoughts for solutions, approaches to consider. And so here goes. Obviously, you all have different experiences and probably ideas yourself, so feel free to completely toss them out the window. Firstly, the more that can be done to build supportive teams of close colleagues, departmental colleagues, contacts within disciplines, networks like this, the better. Talking about our doubts, our anxieties as well, as Maz said, our triumphs through with those who we work closely with can do us wonders. It can kind of push away some of the wackier thoughts and feelings that pop into the head. I have a best friend with whom, when I'm feeling like maybe a thought is, at the boundaries of logic and reason, I phone up and go, is this a mad thought? And she will tell me honestly, yes, that has no bearing in reality, or no, this is something that you need to look at. Secondly, academics really do need to be encouraged to have lives outside of work. It's really easy to wrap ourselves up in research as our vocation, but it's ruinous to have nothing else to do apart from work. Even if we don't want to, getting out, having hobbies. I know this is much more difficult in a pandemic world, but hopefully if we can pass beyond this, socializing with people who have no understanding of universities and their bubbles can be really helpful. Although obviously people's working lives and patterns vary hugely and we have to respect that, reserving some time as sacred to non-work is, I think, of vital importance. Thirdly, universities have to step up and support staff beyond a basic level of wellbeing training. You need a periodic reevaluation of workload, responsibilities, structures, with a view to their impact upon the lives and the health of their staff. Managers should be trained in the support available to those they manage, from employee assistance programs to external counselling services. And then finally, sector-wide organisations such as this one can campaign for a recognition of some of the more corrosive practices in academia and can bring people positively together like we are today to start conversations about problems and good practices in HE. Now, I've probably gone on too long. I've got absolutely no sense of time, so I'm going to come to a close on a positive. My mental health journey hasn't always been an easy one since leaving home in my teens. I've had periods of homelessness, I've had periods of burnout, I've had periods of great anxiety, as you know, I'm sure we all have. But at the moment, I'm lucky enough to have an amazing team of colleagues in the UE History Department, supportive friends who will put up with my woes, as well as occasionally telling me to buck up and celebrate the things that I have done. A lovely husband, a dog who is currently on my lap. I found joy in walking in the mountains, running, reading appalling books and listening to audiobooks. I know when I'm sad and I take a break. I found that praise lifts me up. So if you're thinking of writing that friendly and positive email to anybody as a takeaway from this session, do it now. It brings joy and it makes people happy. And so do that. And helping others gives me hope. And I think hope is really, really important. So hopefully this session and LSW more generally are able to come up with ideas and strategies to help more ECRs to this position a lot earlier than I managed it. And I hope that you have access to the same level of love and support. Thank you.
So finally, we have Sir Keith Burnett talking. Keith Burnett is a physicist who was head of physics and then head of science at Oxford before being Vice Chancellor of Sheffield. He now chairs the Nuffield Foundation and the Academic Council of the Schmidt Science Fellows. In the latter role, he mentors the Schmidt post-doctoral fellows, over 40 to date, at institutions across the UK and the US.
Thank you very much, Alex. So it's a real privilege to be able to talk to you because you are a very, very important group of people. I remember the times I felt in my early career, trying to move forward, trying to do something exciting and important. And I know how precious all your careers are going to be for the universities or other places you work in, for our society. So thanks for doing that work. And all I'm going to do is talk about a few of my experiences. As Alex just said, my principal role, my biggest role at the moment is actually mentoring. So each and every day I speak to an early career scientist. Some are postdocs, some have made it onto the tenure track ranks in the US, some have moved on to more senior roles. And let me say, first of all, that what Maz says is absolutely important and right, that various versions of imposter syndrome are very common. Not the vicious and most difficult ones, but it's very common for people, even I see, who have everything going for them, all the possibilities, still to feel that fact they're not in the right place, or they're not doing the right things, or they got there by chance, all the things that Maz talked about. And I talk to them about those issues and we talk openly about them. And I think that's the first thing you need. You really need someone to be able to open up to. Now, it may be a mate, it may be a friend. If you can, it may be a counselor, but I really recommend you have somebody that you can talk openly about those issues. In my case, the young scientists that I talk to me, you know, I'm the person. And so I have a very precious role in terms of listening to the doubts, listening to the difficulties of that sort. And what Maz said is right. You need somebody who's going to tell you to celebrate. You need somebody to celebrate all of the things that are going on and move forward. But I've got a few of things that come up all the time, you know, things that come up, and they're related to the imposter syndrome, but they're driven also by uncertainty, by insecurity, just as Sarah said. You know, they're imagined things in our own life, but there are also a lot of difficult things happening around us that can drive those feelings and make it more difficult for us. And the first thing I'd say is, don't feel bad about feeling bad, you know. Don't feel bad about having doubts or difficulties at the time. They're endemic across all of our lives, but they're particularly true, I think, in modern academia. You know, I mean, I look back to the time I had as an academic. So I was an academic for nearly 47 years now, a long time. And what I see is it has become, just as Sarah's talking about, far more things that measure you, push you, far more metrics, far more difficulties of that sort. So be honest about it. You have chosen a tough existence, right? and just be honest about it and not accept it. I'm not saying just go for it and accept it, but just be aware that that's true. The second thing I would say is I'm always having to tell people who are incredibly capable, very powerful, doing exciting things, to back off a bit, not to butt so hard against those issues, not to work so hard. As Sarah was saying, leave it, take a few days off, go read some books, do some walking, do things outside that content. Don't try to power through those feelings, those bad feelings. If you can't easily dissipate them by talking and doing that sort, if they're powerful and keep pushing you, make you feel hard, then get some counselors, go and talk to a counselor about it, see if that works, try it out. It's incredibly effective for some people being able to talk to a professional counselor. But you may feel, as I did, going back, that I couldn't do that, somehow showing vulnerability, showing I couldn't power through it, showing I couldn't do it. You'll find that people, your colleagues and friends, are incredibly supportive when you seek that sort of help, that sort of counseling help. You will not find them saying, oh, well, shouldn't do that, should be able to punch through it. No, not at all. And in fact, the more capable you are, the more they're willing to say, good on you for showing that vulnerability. Good on you for sharing the difficulties you have. Good on you for just being with us in that way. So be open about it. And then when you do take time off, don't worry if you are thinking, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right things? Should I be carrying on in this? Because again, don't push yourself. Think about and reflect. So what I would say works many times, not always, but it's actually, are you asking yourself the following question? Do you feel joyfulness in part of what you do? Not immediate, there's lots of delayed pleasure in doing research, but is there an aspect of joyfulness and of spontaneous joy in what you do? And that isn't just getting a paper published or some big thing, like getting a book out. I mean, in the simple things you talked about going to the library, Sarah. Was there a pleasure in looking at the records? Alex, when you're in Aberystwyth, is there a pleasure in just listening to people of that sort? Take the pleasures of what you do as an academic very seriously and elevate them in that way. But if they aren't there, if it's become awful, if there's no joy in the things you're doing, if you can't do that, then do seek help. It's not a problem. Don't think of it as something you just have to internalize a problem, right? Well, I've had very serious times where I've had to take time off because of stress, of burnout, including when I was at times a vice chancellor. Okay, I found enormous support, both from the professionals that helped me, but also then the colleagues around me. And you heal if you give yourself time, if you give yourself to rest, if you talk to professional people. I've got mental health problems of various sorts in my family, all of which that have been gently resolved by professional help and things of that sort. And it's really important to feel you can do that. So if you feel you can't, talk to somebody who's going to encourage you, talk to somebody who'll get through it. So that in a sense is something I have seen work over and over again. I've seen people come back from serious mental health issues, back in academia, back into research. I've seen people come back from counseling where it was relatively modest and they were able to get, as it were, advice, help of how the pattern of their life. But, you are doing, in the end, difficult things. Being a researcher is a very serious business. And I'm not just talking about science. I chair the Nuffield Foundation. We fund social science of great sort. And if you'll see, I think today in the Times Higher supplement, you'll see an article by me about why important it is to study history, Sarah. So just, I really feel the importance of our overall scholarship and our mission. But it is hard and tough. And you should be honest with people about how tough it's got, honest with the department around you and honest yourself. And then look for the joy, look for the spontaneous thing in being in this wonderful community of scholars. And you're going to do and have a wonderful time. I really feel that. But only if when times are tough, things are difficult, you feel you can seek help, counsel, and things of that sort. Universities generally do have very good counseling services, maybe difficult to get onto them sometimes, but persist and get help. You may need other help, do it, seek it. get professional thing. Psychiatrists are very good. There's some wonderful professional people around who understand things of this sort. And if you can seek them and get help from them, you'll have a much, much more happy and good time. So thanks very much.